What's an anime without the thrill of a good nail-biting near-death situation? Or in some cases, straight-up in-death situations? What if our jolly, toothy-grinned Santa Claus Titan actually listened to his mama and chewed his food, and Eren went by at the beginning of Attack on Titan Season 1? Where does the fate of Paradis lie if Eren simply peaced out as another casualty of Titan carnage? Disclaimer: heavy spoilers for pretty much the entirety of Attack on Titan. Nothing like the joy of watching our favorite protagonist face the Reaper in the eyes and say, "Not today, Hades," usually in the form of a well-deserved power boost, because we can always rest assured that the main character would never die. But Attack on Titan nearly took that shave just a tad farther by straight up murking the main character in the first 5 episodes. And while that was a well-written fake out, this time it's not. To begin with, let's pause the scene right at the fateful chomp. From the second Eren's pulse hits 0, the story could go one of many ways. Today, we're gonna follow maybe the darkest timeline in our list, that being Path 1. Marley's mission succeeds. The fall of Marley. Let's not beat around the bush. This path means that the Marleyan double agents, Reiner, Annie, and Bertolt, managed to snag the founding Titan all the way at the beginning of the show. What's ironic is that this is pretty much the worst thing that could have happened for Marley. Why? Santa Claus noms down on our dear MC and drinks in all that sweet, sweet spinal fluid juice. The Titan's limbs start to shift, its body breaks down, and just like that, and quite literally a puff of smoke, or well, steam, we have a brand new founding Titan and Attack Titan shifter. A balding, bearded, very sweet, but also very confused old Eldian man. His sudden entrance into the story also marks his swift exit as a person, because it's right here that he gets picked up by one of our Marleyan traitors, after which he either dies or becomes nothing but a plot device to use when the time is right. Old Man Santa has no autonomy. Without a pre-existing Titan ability to move Santa to safety, his exposed body would just plop exactly where his Titan fell. And since he'd be unconscious from, well, understandable shock, he'd be a sitting duck for at least the next hour. This gives one of the 3 Titan shifters more than enough time to chance across the unconscious body and put 2 and 2 together. And even if luck wasn't on their side like that, Santa would definitely be seen and chomped on by any other Titans in the area, which starts a kind of hilarious conga line of Titans all eating the body, turning back into a human, and then getting eaten by another Titan. So, in the span of a couple hours, we could potentially have any number of new founding Titans, until at least someone sees the billowing cloud of smoke and suspicious lack of Titans and puts 2 and 2 together. The quickest of which would likely be Reiner, Bertolt, or Annie. Seriously, this one body might actually be more effective for Titan slaying than the entire scouting regiment. Sorry, Levi. So one of the 3 spies comes across a sleeping body amongst the steam of a Titan carcass, and from this point, immediately realizes 3 things. A, one of the scouts was a Titan shifter. B, considering the scouts' overall lack of knowledge, they didn't know they were a Titan shifter. And C, they just died and handed over the Marleyans' entire mission objective on a single unconscious silver platter. They then figure that this Titan could be either one of 2 Titans currently unclaimed by Marley, the Attack Titan, or the Jackpot, the Founding Titan. They likely wouldn't assume both in the same person, but they'd nab the dude regardless. Using the steam as cover, the 3 Marleyans zip off unseen with Santa's body in tow before a single scout even realizes they're gone. Well, maybe Marco would see them, but we all know what happens to Marco. So, objective acquired. Now what? Well, from this point onwards, Paradis loses its role as the main focus of the story. Not finding Eren as the Attack Titan means nothing changes for them. The scouts never learn anything about Titan shifters, they never learn about the female Titan, and they never gain their combat edge to turn the tide against Titans, much less against their enemies across the sea. They stay as they currently are, a ragtag group of cannon fodder desperately searching for some morsel of truth and freedom before their lifespan expires. No Trost, no Shingenshina, nothing. Armin would soon die. Mikasa lets herself be eaten after Eren's death. Erwin, Hanji, and Levi are forced to command their troops into losing battles over and over until they too perish. It's a sobering, quiet, anticlimactic loss for Team Eldia, which is why we switch entirely to the Marleyan perspective. How's it feel to be on the side of privilege? Let's do a quick psych evaluation of our main players. Annie at this point would be mentally done with the mission. Having found a Titan shifter so early, her only care right now would be to go back to dear old dad, and that's pretty much all she cares about. Bertolt would have a similar mindset because while we didn't get the most in-depth dive into old Birdie's backstory, we know this man does not want to be here. I mean, look at him. This is not a party he wants to be in. But he'd also be conflicted on whether to gather more information or just quit while they're ahead and call the win as it is. Reiner is where it gets interesting. His martyr's complex and disassociative identity suffers the most during his time in Paradis, having to come to terms with the fact that the devils on the other side of the wall are not in fact devils. At this point, it's up to debate as to whether Reiner falls into his duty as a scout or as a Marleyan and actively sabotages the mission. But considering how difficult it is for him to keep lying to his friends, he'd likely feel the most at peace if he just got as far away from here as possible. However, the fact that they don't know which Titan good old Santa has is still a factor, and since they still believe that the king holds the founding Titan, they may not assume they got as lucky as they did. So the Marleyans are faced with two choices. One, have half stay behind while either Annie or Reiner run back with Old Man Santa, or two, call the mission here and return to Marley. Whatever their decision is, it would catch the attention of the secret fourth shifter on this island, old monkey man himself, Zeke Yeager, and Peak, but she's not super important here. Now we all know 4 things about Zeke. The first is that despite being the golden boy of Marley, he does not exactly work for Marley. He has his own interests, which now become extremely important in the story. The second is that as someone with royal blood in his veins, he's the only person on Marley with even the possibility of using the founding Titan's powers, meaning regardless of where Santa Claus goes, all roads lead to Zeke. The third is that Zeke is extremely smart, likely one of the smartest characters in the series, which means that if he managed to get his hands on Santa, he'd likely be able to instantly deduce exactly what kind of power lies in his poor spine. That's really been through way more than an old man should. And 4, we know that Zeke can access the Founder's power. So, however it happens, the Marleyan scouts would need to get to the edge of Paradis to return Santa to Marley. That really wasn't a sentence we expected to say. Anyways, they didn't know Zeke was currently on the island, so they wouldn't really know to inform him about their little capture. But not to worry, because even if Annie, Reiner, and Bertolt just missed Zeke on the way back, it wouldn't matter because they'd all have to wait till Marley sends ships to go pick him up. Honestly, we're not entirely sure what exactly the plan was to leave the island because, well, they never really made it that far. This would give Zeke time to catch up to the 3 and gracefully take this burden off their hands. Now this is where the entire story takes a complete 180. Because in this moment, an event that took 4 seasons to come to fruition happens right at the beginning of the story. Zeke activates the founding Titan. It's unsure as to whether Zeke would enter the coordinate immediately upon touching the Founder's Titan shifter, or whether they need to intend for that specific outcome. Even if it's the latter, Zeke's a pretty persuasive guy. Passionate, knowledgeable, just crazy enough to make sense. That's exactly what our confused, bloody, exhausted Santa Claus needs. Zeke would feed him exactly the kind of devote your heart's nonsense to make Santa feel like he has a purpose, a divine duty to sacrifice his body for the greater good. And just like that, the 2 strangers shake hands and the most powerful creature in the world awakens, without Marley even having the foggiest idea about it. Now, we know Zeke's plan. To use the founding Titan's powers to wipe Eldia off the face of the earth by removing their ability to reproduce, the euthanasia plan. Let the race go quietly into the night, dying of old age, as a race claimed by history, their suffering finally ended. And this time, that actually happens. We don't know if Zeke has any more plans after that, but it might be safe to assume that after this one act, Zeke would call on all the Eldians in the world, explain that they are saved from this cruel world, and then dip. Paradis is dead. Now all Eldians in the Marleyan internment camps would freak out, which would catch the attention of the Marleyan government, who would be confused, but upon learning what Zeke said, would be furious. They're now on a ticking clock. Titans are now an endangered species. Within the next few years, they'll all die out along with the Eldians' race. So they would attempt to launch an offensive, call out all the shifters, and try to catch the world off guard in a complete blitz attack. They're desperate, so they need to use their edge while they still have it. But unfortunately, the world has been adapting, and secondly, all of their shifters are on Paradis. And after learning that they're all basically dead anyways, not all of them would be the most pumped to jump into war again. Zeke is AWOL. Peak would likely stop caring about Marley and find a way to live the rest of her days peacefully. The same goes for Bertolt. Reiner would actually be relieved and would likely go back to attempt to resume his identity as a scout, no longer tied to Marley. Annie would be the only one willing to go back, but only to see her dad, not to fight. And of course, the Jaw Titan still with Ymir, who by this point would just be a traveling nomad, living the good life. Who knows? Maybe she'd still find Krista and they'd be able to end up together, since Krista isn't shackled to a royal life of baby making anymore. This leaves the Warhammer Titan as Marley's only weapon, and we've seen that she's not exactly invincible. So slowly but surely word gets out that Marley has lost the power of the Titans, and slowly but surely all their Titan-centric warfare is overwhelmed by the rest of the world's rapidly advancing technology. Slowly but surely, all the Eldians and Marley would revolt, choosing not to live out their final days in a cage. And slowly but surely, Marley will fall, all because of one death.